Hello, family. This is your brother Daniel Haru coming direct and live from the Northwest, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington. And this is a late night video. I'm not going to spend much time on it. I just want to address a few things that I've been seeing out there in the social media. Some of the Kemetic brothers have been putting a thing down, especially Sarah Suit and Seti. Big ups to him. Always, I want to give love to my brother Jabari, Sinetta, all the brothers that's putting it down. Garfield, these Magi's that's out here holding Kemetic spirituality and this Kemetic nation down. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about something that's been kind of going on, and Poe's been constantly thrown out there. Some of these posts I tend to ignore them, but when it comes to Kemetic history, if something's out there and is brought out with kind of a false pretense or assumptions, then I feel I have to respond to just correct or to give the perspective or different perspective, Kemetic perspective on it, so that someone who does not know about Kemetic spirituality or Kemetic history, then they can be clarified and edified in what they're looking at. So one of the things that I wanted to bring out was, a post that was brought out. I'm not going to mention nobody's name. They'll know who I'm talking about when I bring it out. And if they want to respond, they can. I always feel free. Just bring information. I'll bring mine. So I'm going to do some screen sharing. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. The topic of this is Ramses II. And the videos, like I said, and polls been put out, and information been shared, and about whether he was black or not, whether he was African or not. And I just want to dispel all these false assumptions that people may have, and people take certain things and they go with them. They go with them. They don't do further research on them. But that's why we're here, is to correct anything that is not in line with history. So what I'm going to do is I'm sharing my screen right now, and this right here is telling you, video is saying Ramses II is presented as a Caucasian, and this is what the brother had put out. He's saying that you looked at this Ramses mummy, which is in the Cairo Museum, and if you look at it, he's pointing out why he thinks that this mummy is Ramses II. Now, we also have to know some things about, Egypt, and when Egypt was finally invaded. We're talking about the Romans, after the Romans, and then going further, into the, 1500s, 1600s. They were robbing the graves. They was robbing the pyramids. They were changing history. They were rewriting history. They were putting things in that weren't there. We all know that they tried to deface a lot of our African monuments. They tried to whitewash Kemet in Egypt. It was the whitewash of European, the whitewash of Arabs. They're trying to erase the legacy that our ancestors left us. So on here, I want to get to just some points on this mummy, which I've stated before, is not Ramses. This is clearly not Ramses. This is not a African person, or used to be a person. It's a mummy, now dried up and everything. But now I'm sure, as the brother is the, and I come brother because I'm saying everything in love with what I'm doing. The brother said, well, look, he has red hair. He typically, this is a Caucasian, has Caucasian features. And I would agree with him 100%, 110%. This is a Caucasian. Where we differ is I don't believe that this is Ramses. I know this isn't Ramses. And so he says, you know, he pointed out this post. He says, look at the hook nose. You have the thin lips. You have the high cheekbones. You have the red hair, and you have blonde hair. So those are some of the things that he said about what makes this mummy non-African. Mostly, I guess they have to be European, based on the time that Ramsey was born or ruled at this time. There wasn't even a European nation, but we'll say non-black. That's what we'll use that term. So as we look in here, we talk about him being a non-black man, Pharaoh of Egypt, Kemet at the time. So what we want to do is we know that the time that Ramsey was supposed to have been born, and we're looking very close to, I believe, like 1279. So we need to look at what time Ramsey was there. So we can talk about the reign of Ramsey, 1279 to 1213. Okay, so we want to look at if he's black. So what I want to do is I want to take a historical journey backwards to see exactly who was ruling or what was going on in Kemet at the time, where there would have been a non-black, non-African ruler at the time. We do know that parts of Kemet was conquered before the Greek Empire, before the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and so forth. We know that there was small invasions, and they did hold pieces of the Delta, but they never conquered all of the Delta at this time. So post-Kemetic dynasty, we see the Syrians ruled in the 26th dynasty from 664 to 610 BCE. Then we see the Persians ruled in the 27th dynasty, 525 to 323 BCE. The Greeks ruled from 323 to 30 AD, and the Greco-Roman from 30 BCE. So those are all the rulers post it was pretty much done. They had lived their, went through their glory. All the monuments, the statues, the religious foundations, the spirituality system, the institutions, all of that had already been built. It was already established, done. We even had large migrations during these times of the Assyrians, the Persians, and the Greeks, where many of the Egyptians, or if you want to call them Egyptians or Kemetics, had already left. We also have to understand that the delta, or the Nile Delta, going into the Mediterranean Sea, when Kemet was made, it was a developmental stage, and we're talking about it wasn't just like a certain group of like one people. It was what formed into the Kemetic spirituality, or people around the Sudan, Nubia, going from the Nile, up the Nile, or down into what reached as the zenith of the Kemetic spirituality, Kemetic technology, and just the glory of that time. So all of these people, the Syrians, so these are all the rulers who ruled after the post-Kemetic dynasty. Okay, so who were the invaders before the Kemetic periods, before the post-Kemetic periods? Who were these people? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish a timeline and see how this might have happened, or if Ptolemy was non-African. If he happens to be something of a European descent, where did he? How was this assumption made? So we know that the invaders before the post-Kemetic period was over with was the Hyksos. And as you can see, the Hyksos was a foreign people. Once again, we were from a diverse origin. They figured possibly from West Asia. During this time, we know that they from West Asia were black people, wasn't Europeans. Europeans hadn't even entered into history at this point. They settled on the west. They settled in the eastern delta, Nile Delta, from a time period before 1650 BCE. The arrival of the Hyksos led to the end of the 13th dynasty, initiated the second intermediate period of Egypt. In the context of ancient Egypt, the term Asiatic may be people, native people to the area east of Egypt. So we know that at this point, Egypt controlled that whole area for the most part. You know, there once again, anybody that was in the area were non-European, non-Arab. Okay, so let's find where did these Europeans actually come from. Okay, it says in about 1650 BC, the Hyksos invaded the territory of both dynasties, established the 15th dynasty. The collapse of the 13th dynasty caused a power vacuum in the south, which may have led to the rise of the 16th dynasty based on Thebes and possibly of a local Abbasid dynasty. The Hyksos eventually conquered both, albeit for only a short period of time in the case of Thebes. From then on, the 17th dynasty took control of Thebes and reigned for some time in a peaceful coexistence with the Hyksos kings, perhaps as their vessel. So it's showing that the Hyksos came in, they ruled for a period of time, and they might have had a vessel of some areas and so forth. But that's who ruled at that time, right? And then it talks about Sincanari, Tau, Comos, and Amos waged war against the Hyksos and expelled Khafmudi, their last king in Egypt in 1550. So we know that they left. They were from 1650 to 1550. That's when so we're talking about 100 years they reigned, and then they were out of there, and they kind of went. And this is pretty much like the Exodus. So if you put together like a biblical story of when Moses came around that time, this is around the same time that that story of the Exodus for, you know, the biblical story for the Exodus for the Hebrews. They put a timeline for Abraham, if you want to go anywhere from 17 to 2100 or something like that. So we know about 400 or some art years, or 500 years from Abraham to Moses and so forth. Okay, so stand on track. So we know that they was expelled in the 1550s BC. Okay, so who were the rulers in Kemet after 1550, which will establish us how did this, he claimed that this mummy is actually non-black, non-European. Who were these rulers? So these rulers would have some type of European or non-black heritage or ancestry that would tie them to some other land besides the land that was ruled by Kemet or by some other non-African people. So rules after 1550 to 1729 to the Ramses II. Queen Pharaoh Hatshepsut, 1508 BCE. Now we know that she was a black woman. Queen Nefertari and her son Imhotep I, 1560 BCE. We know that they were black. Thutmose the third, 1450 BCE. Queen Tai, 1391 BCE. Grandmother of Akhenaten. So, and right now we see a bunch of black people. Akhenaten, 1355 BCE, father of King Tut. So we're getting kind of close to 1279 and I don't see any Europeans at this point that would have been pharaoh of Egypt. So we have Horemheb, Horemheb 1306 BCE to 1292. He's appointed Ramses I as his visor. Now, there's something about Horemheb which was interesting, is he wasn't part of the royal family. He pretty much came up through the ranks, through the military ranks, which is also very interesting because Ramses I actually did the same thing. He liked Ramses, and he made him his vicar, visor, and that's how Ramses became in position to become pharaoh. So Ramses I ruled from 1290 to 1279 BCE, and he was the father of Seti the first, and then Seti I. We're talking about around 1290 BCE, was the father of Ramses. In 1279 to 1213 BCE, that was Ramses II. Now, some of these dates, we can go approximate dates for how they fit in. But the main thing is that when you look at these line of kings that ruled in Egypt during this time, none of these are non-black. Most of them come from Kush. We all know that, Kush is black. They don't come from anywhere else. We know that when the Hyksos got expelled, they exodus, that they settled around in the areas, but the majority of the people in the Nile Delta was black people, including the Hyksos, including the Canaanites, including the Hittites, including the Amorites. All these were black people. So the New Kingdom from 1550 BCE to from 1069 BCE. The New Kingdom, also referred to as the Egyptian Empire, is the period in ancient Egypt history between the 16th century BC and the 11th century BC, covering the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasty of Egypt. Radiocarving dating placed the exact beginning of the New Kingdom between the 1570 and the 1544 BCE. Now, as you can see, if you look, this right here is all Egypt. So we go in here, we're going up here, we're going into Canaan and this and that. So, he wants us to believe that somehow that this people over here, like these Greeks, has somehow maybe came in here and ruled, or these Arabs that was over here who, Assyrians who came over much later was a ruler. None of that happened. All of these people that were in here were black. None of them were non-white, and we're not even talking about the migrations into what we call Arabia and Assyria, and even in the areas of Greece and so forth. So this is the area in which they had a part of the empire. And so I just want to know, where did this European Ramses come from? Because they didn't settle in here. We know that they didn't. In this time period, there was no European influence at this time in here. Nowhere in here, especially not up in this delta. You got Kush right here, and they just kicking everybody ass in here. Everybody. So when Upper Egypt, when the Egypt got in trouble around the delta, they was kicking people out all the time and saving them. So we know that didn't happen. Okay, so Seti I. So we want to figure out, so who was his father? Let's know a little bit more about Ramses' father, Seti I. Okay, Seti I was the pharaoh of the New Kingdom, 19th dynasty in Egypt, the son of Ramses the first in Satari, and the father of Ramses II. After an enormous social upheaval generated by economic and religious reform, Hiram helped Ramses I and Seti I mainly priority was to reestablish the order of the kingdom and reaffirm Egypt's sovereignty over Canaan and Syria. Now, they were talking about to reaffirm their Egypt's sovereignty over Canaan and Syria. Now we know Canaan and Syria, all pretty much these are black people just from this land. So, which has been compromised by the increasingly external pressure from the Hittite states. Seti, with energy and determination, confronted the Hittites several times in battle. Without succeeding in destroying the Hittites as a potential danger to Egypt, he reconquered most of the disputed territories of Egypt and generally concluded his military campaign with victories. This is also like Wikipedia. So we can go further into it. I just want to make a quick post. So I'm just going to use Wikipedia as my sources at this point. So that was Seti I. Now, this is Seti I. He's from Kush. Now Delta, Kush. And does he look like a European? No, to you? I mean, he said, "Oh, look at the thin lips." Well, that don't look thin lips at all. I don't see a hook nose, nothing like that. So this is a black man. There's no argument or dispute over Seti, whether he was black or not, or his wife, for that matter. Okay. This is Ramses I, grandfather of Ramses II. Ramses was the founder of the king of the ancient Egypt 19th dynasty, originally called Paramesu. Ramses I was a non-royal birth, being born into noble military family from the Nile Delta. So the Nile Delta at this point was controlled, governed by a black nation, by black people. His father is also black. Okay. And then it says, perhaps near former Hyksos capital of Avaris. He was the son of a troop commander called Seti. So right here we got Ramses the First is black. This is his grandfather. His father Seti is black. Okay. Once again, we want to look at the features of this mummy, the remains of our ancestor. Okay. This is a black man. No dispute whether Ramses the First was black. Okay. Now, this is the Pharaoh Seti the First and his statue. This is how they depicted him. This is how they saw our black ancestors as a pharaoh. Now we can see the face, and we gotta know that like the mummy is drawn on all moisture, so you're going to see kind of a sunken look in him. But this is how they depict him, and you can see they tried to break the nose off. I don't know what it is with Europeans, Arabs, but they always breaking off noses and chiseling down lips, But the way that our ancestors made these statues, they just couldn't destroy them. So they're trying to write themselves and place themselves back into our history, and by making us dumb and ignorant of our history, and then they can put themselves in and say, "Hey, that was us. We know this to be true. We know that this has been found true. We know that Dr. Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, Sheikh Anta Diop, they all have confronted historians about the history of Kemet. This is the mummy of the Pharaoh Ramses I, and this is how his statue, this is how they saw him. Once again, you see these features of a black man. You can see the eyes, the wide eyes, the broad nose, the thick lips. Okay. Now, this is Ramses. So Ramses is a black man. And if you're Hebrew, the lineage falls down through the father. Now, that's not our lineage. That's how y'all find y'all lineage. Everything falls through the patriarch. Ours is the matriarch. So, but if we go by your testing, this is a black man. No one will dispute that, right? Right. His son is also a black man, married to a black woman, but somehow his son is you're non-black but European, which is weird. You know, I don't understand how you get that. So I'm gonna steal this one from Rob Rack. Peace out to Rob Rack. Much love, brother. You know, are you the daddy? Who's Ramses' second daddy? Ramses the first. Are you the father of Seti I? History and DNA test comes back and say you are the father. Second perennial test, Seti. Are you the daddy of Ramses II? Test comes back, historical test comes back. Analysis said, you are not the father of this mummy. Guys, look at this. He says it has red hair, and I'm going to dispel that too. I'm not saying just because he doesn't have red hair, but he's going to use this as red hair that he says you can see he doesn't have any hair. Most Egyptians, if you notice, most Egyptians, they didn't have hair. They were very clean, bald head men. You don't really see the pharaohs with hair on their head, which is funny how you would put hair on this one. But let's just say this one, and he has one of those little Caesar cuts. This is a white man's cut, you know, from a European. You know, this is strictly. You can see that this is either this is a Greco-Roman or a Greek mummy. We know that after they conquered into Egypt, they were so amazed at the civilization that they had that they copied a lot of their spiritual traditions and rituals. And that even when they conquered, Alexander wanted to become or get initiated into the mystery system as a priest. They did not let him. Then we have Ptolemy, who finally got some priests to do it. So we know these things to be true. Now, how the Kemetic saw Ramses II versus his mummy. Okay, so look at this. Okay, look at this mummy of Ramses II, right? This is in the Cairo Museum. You look at that, look at the lips, look at the nose. Okay, you see the hair. Okay, look at the features. The haircut is killing me right now. But look at this, right? Now, look at this statue of this magnificent brother right here, our ancestor. Look at the wide eyes. You have the broad nose. There's no beak here. There's no curvature on this bridge. Okay. Lips, and then as you can see the pharaoh's beard right here. You see all that. So once again, I don't see the connection. So let's go again. Continue. Go right here. Sorry about that. So we go. So when we see this, we see that, you know, I don't get it how someone would say that this right here This mummy on the left side is Ramsey. If your grandfather is black and your father's black, African, Egyptian, Cushite, there is no way you can be a Greek or Roman. As Dr. Henry Clark once said when he was talking about the historicity of Jesus Christ, he did not agree with the historicity of Jesus Christ. He did not believe that he was a real character in the Bible or a real person from the Bible. But what he says that if you want to talk about, on a dispute his color, he can solve that very quickly. He asked, was he a Greek? Answers no. Was he a Roman? The answer is no. Well, the Greeks and Romans were the only non-black people around at that time. So if he wasn't a Greek and he wasn't a Roman, he had to be one of those other people. And all of those other people were non-European. So you cannot use an article and not look at all the information that would trace this man who Ramsey is or supposed to be to his African heritage, his Kemetic heritage. It does not work that way because it fits your premise or your stance by trying to fit into Kemetic history, trying to find your place in history. This is not hate. This is fact. In fact, supersedes opinion. Now, let's go back to what we said talking about. We said that, let's get to the red hair. So on some of the posts, he says, oh, look at the red hair. I guess white people or European people are only people that have red hair. I have already, I thought I already kind of dismissed that theory because I'm in Northwest. I'm in Portland, Oregon. And during the 3-on-3 contest that's held at the Motor Center every year, I had a friend introduce me to a guy. He's a basketball player. He says, man, hey, I want to introduce you to this guy. He says, man, when you see him, he go trip you out. I was like, what do you mean he go trip me out? He's like, man, I'm telling you, the dude's from Africa. And he has crystal blue eyes. He says, man, it's trippy. And I'm like, what? Because I've never seen a black person with blue eyes, not a dark person. I mean, this guy is black. And he introduced me to the brother, and the brother had blue eyes. He wasn't mixed. He was from Africa. His mother was African. His father was African. His grandmother is African. His great-great-grandmother was African. His grandfather was African. There is no mixture in there, but yet still this brother had blue eyes. So they just tells you, which I try to explain to people who, if you want to know about Africa, you just can't lump Africa in like one area or one set of people. Africa is a continent. It's not a country. It is the most diverse place in the world. I think it has over 3,000 or 300 diverse groups or ethnic groups in Africa alone. So we come in every shape, form, and size. So when you want to talk about, oh yeah, black people don't have blonde hair. Okay, so let's see. Black, red hair. Let's see what they got. Okay, so this right here is something I just found online, and there's plenty of this, right? So this is black people with blonde hair, the Asian population, and they say, oh, they're not African. Okay, well, I beg to differ. It is the people in Northeast Australia. Now, when you say there's no black people, we know that the migration from Africa, when we start talking about the migration going south into Australia, that these people are of African descent. And so You know, when we look, these people, this clearly has red hair, right? Look at these kids. I mean, it's like saying that Africans can't be albinos. We know that's not true because, you know, in some cultures, in some areas, that albinos were being hunted and used in rituals and killed. They thought that they would give them, you know, spiritual power and so forth. So we know that's not true. So right here we see that there's plenty of black kids and people that have red hair. And this is, why are you showing me kids? Well, kids turn up to be adults. So when they get adults, do they not have red hair? I mean, stop bringing up silly arguments. That does not make sense. So as you can see, Ramsey is a African black man, not a European. There is no history that shows anyone of a European descent or culture that conquered into Egypt in around the time that Ramsey ruled. There's no indication that anybody came into Egypt and ruled even when his grandfather was there. And we're talking about Ramsey the First or Seti the First. So that's all I got for you guys today. I'm going to be putting out more stuff as time goes by. Once again, this is your brother Daniel Heru, the Kemetic Magi, just putting things back in order. And that's how they should be in my art. I want to say Hotep to all my Kemetic brothers, Shalom to all my Hebrew brothers, Assalamu alaikum to my Muslim brothers. One love, one people. And we will leave it on that good note. Peace.